Hey guys, welcome back to another video. And right here in front of me is the TV that was in our camper that no longer works. While we were camping, we went to go turn on the TV and it did not work whatsoever, no response. And today I'm going to take it apart and diagnose and repair this TV. This TV fits in a very particular spot where we can't put any bigger TVs in, so we can't upgrade to a bigger TV. And this is a very specific model that was made just for RVs. So we're going to try to fix this one rather than getting a new one. This is kind of a nice TV because it's got so many different inputs here. It's got HDMI component input, VGA, and it's got an extra audio output here. That's what these connectors are for. On this TV they actually have arrows pointing to the screws you need to take out, but there is one screw here that is kind of hidden, and you have to remember to take that out or the cover won't come off. Whenever I take something apart to fix it, I make a sheet with the different screws and where they go. This makes it easier to remember where they go when you're reassembling it. Okay, now I'll lift off the back cover, making sure to be careful about the wire that connects to these output jacks. As you can see, here is a small module that goes to the audio output here, and it's screwed down, so we have to unscrew that before we can take the cover off anymore. Okay, now that I've taken the screw out, we can take it off, and I will put it right here, making sure not to put any stress on the wire. So here's the inside of the TV. Here we have our main processing board and our power supply board. If your TV has been plugged in within the last few days, it's important to discharge the high voltage capacitor on the power supply. Alright, here's the primary side of the switching power supply. This is the big capacitor here that we have to discharge. You can see it's 450 volts, 150 microfarad. We need a little tool for discharging it, and what you use is a alligator clip with a resistor around 1 kilo ohm. Now what we do is clip the one side of our alligator clip to one of the leads of the capacitor. Now we use the resistor to touch the other lead of the capacitor to dissipate any extra power that might be stored in it. So now we just use the other end to touch it just like that to dissipate any electricity. And just like that, now it's safe to work on. Okay, first we're going to check the fuse on the power supply. Okay, right here is our fuse. You can see it's covered up by this blue piece of rubber. And we can take that off. And that exposes our fuse. To test our fuse, we're going to use a multimeter set to the continuity setting. Now we just test the fuse and see if it's good. If you hear the beep from your multimeter, that means that your fuse is good. If the fuse is blown, that means that something has gone wrong and caused the fuse to blow. And if you just put another fuse in, it will probably just blow again. In this case, the fuse isn't blown, so there's something else that has stopped it from working. Now the second step is to look for any obviously blown components, and usually you will see like black discoloration on the circuit board near any components that have gone bad. Okay, so I don't see any obviously blown components. So the next thing we want to look for is any oily substance near any capacitors on the PCB. The oily substance is actually the electrolyte that's inside of the capacitors. And sometimes when capacitors go bad, they will leak their electrolyte onto the circuit board. So I don't see any leaking capacitors, so the next thing we want to look for is any bulging capacitors. Since this TV has been in a camper most of the year that isn't heated or cooled, it goes through a lot of temperature changes, which is hard on the capacitors. So with that in mind, we can conclude that the likelihood for a capacitor failure is a little bit higher than most other electronics. Next, we're going to look for any bulging capacitors. We want to look at the tops of the capacitors, and if they're rounded, that means that they have gone bad. When some capacitors go bad, the contents of them tends to expand, so that would cause a bulging at the top of the capacitor. Capacitors usually have a pressure release at the top. That's what these lines are here. After a close look, I've discovered that there is a bad capacitor in this group of capacitors. The capacitor is right here in this group, and if you look closely, you can see this one right here actually has a bulging top. Here's a closer look at the bad capacitor. You can definitely tell that the top is bulging. So this might be the reason why it's not working. But yet again, there might be other reasons why this isn't working. Now that we found the likely problem for our TV not working, we can take out the power supply board. Now we can disconnect the wires going to it and unscrew it from the TV. Here's our main power input here. This is the low voltage outputs from the power supply that go to the logic board. Since this TV is an older one, this one actually has fluorescent backlighting. So these are the wires here that go to the backlight fluorescent tubes, and this is the transformer that steps up the voltage for those. Okay, now let's unscrew the 4 screws. Now we can pull out the board. Now we have to look at the rating of this capacitor so we can find a replacement one that has the same rating and that is the same size. So this capacitor here that is blown is a 16 volt 1000 microfarad. Okay, so I've actually found a replacement from another circuit board that has the same rating and that is the same size. Okay, now we can go replace the capacitor. Alright guys, so I'm at my workbench and I've got the supplies that I need to replace this capacitor. So I've got my soldering iron, some solder, and the replacement capacitor, some copper desoldering braid, a Sharpie. We'll use that to mark the negative side of the capacitor. So this soldering iron has a variable temperature. It goes up to 5, and I'm going to set it to about 2.5 since this is a smaller component. Now I turn it on and I'm going to wait for it to heat up. Okay, what we want to do is find the leads here, and the one on the right is the one that is marked with the stripe, so that one's the negative. To mark the negative, I'm going to mark it with a Sharpie with a dot right next to the negative lead. Now I know which one is the negative lead when I unsolder the capacitor. Alright, now my soldering iron is warm and I can clean off the tip a little bit. Just using a wet sponge helps. Just like that. I'm using resin core solder so I don't have to use any flux. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of solder to the 2 leads, and this will make it a little easier to unsolder. Okay, now that I've added some solder to the leads, we can desolder it. Now I can heat up one of the leads and pull it through. Okay, I've pulled this one through just a little bit, and now I'm going to do the other side and pull it out just a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to keep repeating this until it comes out. So that pin's out. Now that one's out. And here's our bad capacitor. Okay, now I'm going to use some desoldering braid to get the old solder off the pad. Okay, now I'm going to get the solder off the other side. And this one over here needs a little bit more. Okay, now I'm going to use a Q-tip with a little bit of alcohol on it to clean it up a little bit. Okay, now you can see the holes are open and we can easily put in the new capacitor. Make sure to pay attention to polarity of the capacitor. So this is the negative side here, so if I flip it over, it's the closest side to this other capacitor. And then this side is negative here, so it goes in just like that. Now I'm going to solder it on. Alright, now that it's soldered on, we can use a little bit more alcohol to clean up the extra flux. Alright, so I've got the old cap in this component tester, and let's see what it says. So you can see it says 3,562 microfarad. when this is a 1000 microfarad cap, so it's clearly bad. Alright, so let's go put this board in our TV. Alright, so we're back upstairs and let's put in the new board. Now I'm going to screw it in and reconnect the connectors. Now I'm going to put the little rubber piece back on. Now before I put the back cover on, I have to re-screw on this little module here. Now all we gotta do is put in the screws. Okay, now I'm gonna go plug it in and power it up and see if it works. Alright, so I've got it plugged in, and now let's power it on and see if it works. Power light's on. And just like that, it works. Alright, so that's about it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe to support my channel.